Mary Jo?
Hi, Allison. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
I'm trying to figure out, I can't see myself. So, oh, now I can see myself. All I see is the big December reading series.
Right.
I had the time wrong until about 2 hours ago.
Yeah, I noticed that, but I didn't have a lot of access to like sending you an email and letting you know, but it was the right time in a lot of other places. So
I
all
corrected it eventually.
right.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
It's a crazy time of year, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I've lived in Minnesota most of my life, but as I get older, I get a little more despondent with that first snowfall.
Mhm.
Especially when it was it was brutally cold too, that first snowfall. And I just felt like, oh, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's with me, it's more, well, I'm a freeze baby, so there's that, but it's more the lack of it's just the darkness. I'm so affected by dark.
Yeah.
And in the summer, I don't need any sleep and I'm blah, blah, blah. And then this time of year, I could wake up at 7 and honestly go to bed at 6. When it's dark at 3:30 or 4, my body is just like, go, go. I mean, I never do, but I'm wondering if I would actually like sleep that whole time.
So you can stay up until 6, because honestly, I want to get in my pajamas at 4:30. I'm not proud of it. Hi, Anya.
Hi.
Hi guys, I'm Hanya. I'm gonna wait a few more minutes to see if more people join, and then we'll get started. A minute or two.
Thank you.
I love your glasses, Hanya.
Thank you. I got them from Warby Parker in downtown.
Oh, so you actually went to a Warby Parker store. I've only ordered online, and done their whole like try
Yeah.
on virtually. Yeah. Well,
No,
they look great.
thank you. All right, so I think we'll get started now. My name is Hanya. I'm the office administrator at North Suburban Center for the Arts, and I'm your host this evening. This is actually our last reading series of the year, and we're actually looking for a curator for the next year. So if you guys are interested, please send us an email at info@northsuburbanarts.org. And I'm just going to go over some few rules for the Zoom meeting. Just make sure you're muted and only the speaker is muted, because Zoom is a one-channel audio. So if you cough or you sneeze or something, the mic's going to go to you and take away from the reading. So just keep that in mind. And if you have questions throughout the reading, just send them in the chat or wait till the end. There'll be a Q&A. And yeah, Mary Jo, you are the curator. So over to you. Oh, sorry, I totally forgot. North Suburban Center for the Arts is having a holiday gift mart that starts tomorrow, hopefully, if the weather permits. If not, it's going to begin on Saturday. So please, guys, come through. There's lots of cute handmade stuff from local artists. But yeah.
Thanks, Hanya. No, and I hope you will support the North Suburban Center for the Arts in any way you can. We have many exciting changes underfoot and underway, and it's just a wonderful organization. And I've been so thrilled to be the reading series curator over the past year. And one of the perks is that I get to read also. But it also makes it a little weird introducing myself. I'm going to go first, and then we get to hear from Alison Mcgee. So I'm just going to introduce myself, and it's going to sound very strange. Hi, I'm a writer and cast member of the cult television show Mystery Science Theater 3000. And I've written for the Star Tribune, Minnesota Monthly, Austin Monthly, Boston Chronicle, Catholic Digest, and many other magazines and websites. And I currently write and perform DVD movie commentary for Riff Tracks. My storytelling work has been featured in Mortified and NPR's All Things Considered. And my memoir about my mother's love of reading, Dumb, 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 my mother's book reviews, will be published by Red Hawk Publications in spring 2022. Mary Jo, it's a pleasure to have me. I am going to read a little bit from my memoir about my mother, and I'm going to be jumping about a little bit. So I will try to do that as organically as possible, if I can just find the right page right now. Dumb, 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 my mother's book reviews. My mother possessed what she liked to call the Cadillac of tweezers. They were forged in brushed nickel. The tips were beveled to such a fine point they were practically a surgical instrument for the small bristly hairs that sprung up on her chin. My mother liked to casually faux name drop the manufacturer like it was a close personal friend, Wusthof. The tweezers were always within arm's reach of her recliner, where she read for hours every day. She was at an angle the better part of each day, and she'd be tilted back, a book in her lap, and a pair of whimsically colored reading glasses on a chain around her neck. There'd be a glass of water, a magnifying mirror, and a stack of books on the cabinet next to the chair. Most of my adult life, I would stop by my parents' house once a week or so just to say hi or score a meal or pick up mail that still got delivered to their house on occasion. I hadn't lived with them for decades, but they always saved my mail, even the junk mail, just in case it might be important, they'd say. My mother would take a break from her reading and set the book down on her lap as I sat across from her in the matching recliner. My mother was really short and her legs barely reached the footrest. And at that slant, I was looking up her nostrils more than straight in her eyes. And we'd talk. Machinery in my father's wood shop hummed through the floor as he worked on some project downstairs. My mother and I talked about my siblings and her grandchildren. We talked about friends, mine and hers, my love life or lack thereof, my job or lack thereof, movies and televisions, food, diets, recipes, always low calorie, and books. There were always books, whatever each of us was reading at the time. And she would describe the book that was currently splayed on her lush lap, all the while running her fingers along her chin in search of any goat hairs that might have sprung up. And then looking over her reading glasses at me, she'd slap the palm of her hand on the cover and declare, "But I could swear I've read the damn thing before. Honest to Pete, I don't know what I've read anymore." A few months after my mother died, my father and I sorted through 3 large closets gorged with stuff she'd found at Goodwill, garage sales, consignment stores over the years. She loved to shop. There were clothes with price tags still attached, save for the day she would lose the appropriate amount of weight and they would fit. Other clothes had once fit and were saved for the day that they would fit again. There were kitchen gadgets, utensils, books, games, puzzles, crock pots, heating pads, all stashed away for birthdays or Christmas and labeled with the intended recipient's name. A Halloween snow globe had a Post-it note stuck to it with my husband's name scrawled on it. The globe was the head of Frankenstein's monster, and it rained a snow of black particles when you shook it. I set it aside for my husband, and we bagged everything else up for Goodwill in a strange mercantile circle of life. My once tall father reached on tiptoes for the clear plastic recipe box on the top shelf and we clicked open the lid, and it was full of index cards with my mother's notes on all the books that she'd read over the past 15 plus years. My mother read so many books, she had to start keeping track. And I wish I had an image to show you of these 3x5 index cards in her handwriting, but I'll just read a few to illustrate. She read so many books, she had to start keeping track. Brass Verdict, Michael Connelly, can't remember, but kept me interested. Coffin Dance, Michael Deaver, can't remember. And then a question mark because there was no title. Forgot name, but was good, Stephen Cannell. The Closers, Michael Connelly, can't remember, but enjoyed it. For such a small box, it was hefty in my hands. You keep it, my father said as he tied up one of the many trash bags. You're the writer in the family, after all. A year later, I sat in a coffee shop with a notebook, pen, and the box. And I smoothed the cards over and over again as they lay on the table in front of me, like a blackjack dealer sweeping up after a hand. The 400 plus cards were mostly alphabetized by the author's last name, but some were out of order, so I put them back in place. My mother wrote the book's title in the upper left-hand corner, and under that, the author. The month and year she read them are in the upper right-hand corner, and the earliest one is from 1997. She ranked most of the books on a scale of 0 to 10, and in the body of the card are plot summaries or thoughts on the book. Pithy 1 or 2 sentence reviews. In her squat, looping cursive, the sentences sometimes straggle past the light blue lines on the cards and dip downward, maybe as she balanced them on her lap as she wrote them in her recliner. I read and I reread all the cards. Who was this woman I'd known my whole life? This woman I thought I knew. How could I, who had won several spelling bees in elementary school, be the progeny of someone who had misspelled a major country? Daughter of Fortune, Isabel Allende, 7 out of 10, girl from Chile, spelled Chili, gets to America Gold Rush, Chinese man, romance and adventure. How could I, who considered the AP Style Manual and Elements of Style Manual and the Elements of Style summer beach reads, have possibly been born of the loins of someone who used greengrocer apostrophes? Louisiana Power and Light, John Dufresne, 6 out of 10, downer of a book about a family, the Fontanas, apostrophe S, who seem to have a curse on them for many generations. How could I, who had read Moby Dick twice, be the issue of a woman who freely admitted, in writing no less, to reading Schlockmeister Sidney Sheldon? Sky is Falling, Sidney Sheldon, 6 out of 10, so-so book about a female, parens, beautiful, newsreader looking into the deaths of wealthy family of 5. All are accidents and all within 1 year. Some of the cards are missing titles, so I do a little sleuthing. Let me jump ahead because I have a little plan here. Sorry, here I come. There were a lot of books before my mother started her record keeping. I can still see the covers of Dr. Zhivago, Gone with the Wind, Lonesome Dove, The Shipping News, The Onion Field and Bonfire of the Vanities, The Thornbirds, and Fat is a Feminist Issue. I didn't like that book even though I'd never read it. I would take the long way around it wherever it might be in the house, and I never picked it up to read the back cover like I did with all her other books. I was afraid I'd be guilty of being fat by association if people should see me in too close proximity to the book. I'd been born pudgy and stayed pudgy, and I didn't want anyone to know. And then my mother read The Woman's Room. It was the late 1970s, the height of the women's movement, and all my mother's friends had read it. It's Marilyn French's feminist novel about the story of some women who got married in the 1950s to the domestic bliss promised them, only for their husbands to leave them for younger women. And day after day, the hefty hardcover rested on my mother's lap as she sat in her reading chair. And my mother was pressed against the brown plaid upholstery of the colonial style armchair, jaw set and breathing through flared nostrils as she turned the pages. She seemed mad a lot after that book. Other books irritated her too, and I can hear it in her reviews. Be Mine, Laura Kosicki. Boring. I read 55 pages. Thriller, but nothing thrilling. Last Get Back Boogie, James Lee Burke. Read about half, a real waste of time. Bag of Bones, King, Stephen, 6 out of 10. Widow writer falls for a widow woman. Widow writer falls for a widow woman and small child with much supernatural stuff. Much too long, 732 pages. That was about the time my mother also began meditating in that brown plaid chair. A doctor recommended transcendental meditation after she'd been diagnosed with high blood pressure. And every afternoon she sat straight up in her chair, eyes closed, hand folded on her lap and inhaling deeply. My mother was trying to find inner peace in the middle of the living room, in the middle of the house, in the middle of 5 kids trying to be quiet. Mom's meditating, we'd holler through the house, warning each other to shut up. And my mother would break her silence with a roar that seemed to come from her toes and detonate in her larynx. Keep it down, I am meditating, for Christ's sake. And then just one more passage, please. I'm sorry, I can't find the next passage, and I will leave it at that. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to introduce Allison, and I'm so excited you're here, Allison. Thank you so much. Let me tell everyone a little bit about you if they don't already know. Alison Mcgee is a critically acclaimed and New York Times best-selling writer of books for all ages. Her most recent novels are The Opposite of Fate and Where We Are. Her poetry and essays have been published widely, and she is the creator and host of the poetry and storytelling podcast, Words by Winter. Her work has been translated into more than 20 languages, and Allison is the recipient of many awards, including 4 Minnesota Book Awards. She lives in Minneapolis. Hi, Allison, welcome.
Hi, Mary Jo. I love your mom. I love her. I can't believe that those cards were only discovered after she was gone. That must have been, I don't know, I'm trying to imagine myself in the same situation in the kitchen, just opening these cards, and there's her handwriting, and there's all her unvarnished thoughts about all these books. Some of the ones she really disliked, I really liked, I'm just going to say. But it's so, I don't know. I think that would have been both incredibly heartbreaking and incredibly comforting at the same time.
Yeah, and I would love to hear more from you after your reading, but as I was reading it, Allison, I got a little emotional because I haven't read them aloud before. And this discovery of a person that you thought you knew, but you can never really know because of the mother, daughter, child, parent thing. But yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was captivating. Thank you, Mary Jo. Let's see. I was trying to think, what should I read tonight? I was looking over my shelves, and I realized a lot of my novels deal with very tough tough things that happen to good people. And then I thought, that's kind of life, I guess. But with so much hardness in the world right now, I decided to read a little bit from two books that to me are just about kindness and love. And I thought I would begin with a picture book, because in my view, grown-ups don't get nearly enough picture books in their life unless they're reading to a little kid. So I really wrote this book. I wrote it in honor of all the young, tattooed, beautiful people around us, and especially parents, because I could imagine how wonderful it would be to have your little kid just ask you about your tattoos, like day after day. Then there's so many beautiful stories behind them. So that's what this book is in honor of. Tell Me a Tattoo Story by Alison Mcgee, illustrated by Eliza Wheeler. I always read my picture books to my kids like that. So when my son went to kindergarten and the teacher would ask for recommendations, he'd say things like, Where the Wild Things Are, written and illustrated by Maurice Sendak. You want to see my tattoos? Oh, little man, you always want to see my tattoos. Here we go then. Nice little role reversal there, Dad doing the dishes. Really like that. This one, well, this one's from my favorite book that my mom used to read to me. Did she read it to me over and over and over? She sure did. This one, Be Kind. That's something my dad always used to tell me, and I always want to remember it. This one, well, this one reminds me of the day I met a pretty girl. What made her so pretty? Well, that's a good question, little man. I'd have to say it was her smile. Have you ever met her? You sure have. This one, well, this is from the longest trip I ever took. Did I miss home while I was there? Yeah, I sure did. This last one, that's just a little hard as all. Those numbers in it, just somebody's birthday, I guess. Whose birthday? Oh, some little man I know is all. What do you mean this one's your favorite? I really wonder about your taste in tattoos, little man. But if you come close, I'll tell you a secret. That one's my favorite too. The end. I love reading picture books. All right. And now I'm going to read a little bit from my novel, What I Leave Behind. It stars this young man, Will, who is 16 years old. He lives in LA with his mom. He works in a dollar store called Dollar Only. His boss is a socially awkward man that named Mr. Montalvo, that he has nicknamed Major Tom. And to me, this book is about kindness that's born of sorrow and pain. Will recently lost his dad. He has lost touch with his dear childhood friend Playa. And he spends most of his time in school and at work and walking, trying to figure his way through this world. And the book is told in 100 very short chapters. And it opens where he is trying to recreate his dad's famous cornbread recipe. So what I leave behind. I dedicated this one to the sweet memories of Jeannie Wong and Garvin Wong, who filled my life with blessings beyond measure. Chapter 1. You see how tiny they are? Chapter 1. You ever had real cornbread? Like from a cast iron skillet stuck in the oven to preheat while you mix the batter? A hot, hot oven. So hot that before you open the door, you have to put oven mitts on your hands. And when you take the cast iron skillet out, you pour in a little melted butter and it hisses. The skillet's that hot. And then you pour in the batter and it starts to brown and puff around the edges even before you put the skillet back in. That kind of cornbread. That's the kind I mean. You got your various cornbreads, my dad used to say. You got your non-sweet Southern, your Swedish Northern, and then you got your dad's cornbread. The way he said it, it was like he was speaking in boldface. You know, dad's cornbread. He used to put it together from a recipe in his head. I might try to make it tonight. I do that sometimes. Try to recreate the recipe. Try to make it come out the way he did, his did. I keep the cast iron skillet in my closet. Eggs in the fridge, butter, no milk, but that's okay. Water will work. Sometimes you got to walk the day out of you, you know, walk it right out through the soles of your feet. Dollar Only's closed now. My shift is over. It's Tuesday night, which means my mom's got the overnight shift. She's not going to notice if I'm not home. The night and its sidewalks are right out that door. Wring out the mop, empty the bucket. Say goodnight to Major Tom, waiting to lock up and exit out the back door to his car. Major Tom, he's not a walker. Most people aren't, but I am. Tonight, the air itself is dark. That happens sometimes. It's not just the lack of sun, it's the presence of darkness. If you're a walker, a real walker, your feet can figure out the right route. Sometimes the right route is one that goes past the places you love. Like the cathedral, like the park off Whittier, like Grand Central Market and its stalls. Sometimes the right route is the route not past other places, places you maybe love, but can't walk by right now, like Playa's house, like the Blessing store, like the river bridge over 4th Street. Let your feet find the way. You'll know it when they do. Then let the day drain out of you. Let whatever comes into your head just float around in there. What's in there tonight? Cornbread. Black cast iron cornbread like my dad used to make. And that raggy little blanket Playa used to carry around to school with her in her backpack back in elementary school. And the case in the back of the Blessing store, 100 blessings, all numbered in Chinese. To light at night for peace, to make a cloud of safety around you, to unbreak your broken heart. How I got the job at Dollar Only? I saw the ad posted in the corner of the window. So why here, said Major Tom, why Dollar Only? I need to start saving up. College. Well, where did you see our ad? I walk past here pretty much every day on my way to school. School. Where do you go? Mountain High. Oh yeah? There's a song called Rocky Mountain High. You ever hear it? Yeah, my mom likes that song. Well, you tell your mom she's got good taste. Can you work nights and weekends? This interview was in Major Tom's office, which is what he calls it, even though it's a closet next to the employee bathroom that he shoved a desk and roller chair into. There's a big corkboard on the wall that he pins motivational quotes to. If you can dream it, you can do it. With the new day comes new strength and new thoughts. A life lived without purpose is no life at all. If at first you don't succeed, try again. It's like he intentionally searched for the lamest quotes in the history of the world, you know? Walk one day out and another day in, home, school, work. In the beginning, I used to call Major Tom by his name, Mr. Montalvo, but he doesn't want me to. Call me Tom, Will, which is weird because I first interpreted it as him wanting to be called Tom Will. But no, Will's my name, Tom's his name, the name he wants me to call him. I'd been there a week at this point, and already I knew that dollar only is pretty much his entire life. Some people, they're like that. They smile in a kind of helpless way. So I did what I do with people like Major Tom. Jump in, start giving them shit, then they feel included, like they're part of the world, like they have actual friends, like someone sees them. Why did I start calling him Major Tom? Because he likes music, he's about my mom's age. I figure he must know that Bowie song, that Space Oddity one she loves, about Major Tom. Bowie was old, but cool. So a nickname like Major Tom would make Mr. Montalvo feel cool, which it does. Because how could it not? I mean, Bowie. Music is the refuge of the lonely, my dad used to say. That and carry on, my wayward son, and don't let the bastards get you down, and a bunch of other things. But those are the ones I think about the most. Music isn't only the refuge of the lonely, but still, I know what he meant. Like with Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom, I say over the loudspeaker when I need Mr. Montalvo at the register. Commencing countdown, engines on, is what he usually says, right back over the loudspeaker. Then he hurries right over. Sometimes he sings part of the song, the line about the spaceship knowing which way to go, and another one about how much he loves his wife. Mr. Montalvo doesn't have a spaceship and he doesn't have a wife, but he loves it when I call him Major Tom. Things aren't easy for Major Tom. Social skills kinds of things, you know. Some things aren't easy for me either, but that's not one of them. I know how to give people shit, when to step forward, when to pull back. It's like a dance where you're born knowing the steps. Not Major Tom, though. Sometimes when I'm closing, I see him sitting there in his closet/office, going over the schedule, writing emails. And every time he thinks he hears someone coming, he swivels around with that little awkward person smile. Once, it's really late because some kid spilled an entire bottle of detergent in aisle 9. I see him close his eyes, jab his finger on one of his motivational quotes, then open his eyes and read it out loud and nod, like his socially awkward life will change now. And honestly, I can hardly stand it. That little nod, you know? Remember that cornbread your dad used to make? That's what Playa said to me at a party last week. It's been a long time since Mountain Elementary. Years since we used to play at each other's houses, back before the girls and boys split into separate factions. But me and Playa will always be friends. You can't forget the elementary years. Will, remember? She'd stuck a bugle on each fingertip like we used to do when we were kids. She waved them in my face like, remember this too? She was talking loud over the music, shouting almost. Yeah, Playa, I remember. Walk and walk and walk the day out. It's like a mantra. Like Major Tom with his, if at first you don't succeed. And like my dad with his, Don't let the bastards get you down. And like dear Mrs. Lynn, which is what my dad called the lady at the blessing store with her help you. Okay, maybe not like her. Been a long time since I was in the blessing store. A long time. Last time I was there with my dad. Maybe dear Mrs. Lynn's not even there anymore. I'm almost home. Maybe I'll get out the skillet again. Make my offering to the cornbread ghosts. The 100 blessings display is at the back of the blessing store, each numbered with a Chinese number. It's been a long time since I was in there, spying on dear Mrs. Lynn when she was arranging stuff. Weird shit. Weird to me and my dad anyway. Like a ceramic hand or a bunch of dried up herbs, each with a specific purpose. Blessing for the dead. Blessing for the afraid. Blessing for the lost. Why those blessings just popped into my head, who knows? The mind, she works in mysterious ways. Or so our third grade art teacher used to say. Miss Trebulon also used to say, make a point of looking up sometimes, artists. She always called us artists. It's a big world, bigger than you think, artists, and full of mystery. So up I look. The jacarandas are in bloom and they're purple. The sky is blue, the palm leaves are green, the air smells like lemons. A helicopter's making that thwap, thwap sound, bending this way and that, like a giant nosy insect. High in the sky, a sharp white contrail changes into a blur of soft marshmallows. You know who Major Tom reminds me of? Jose the fat kid in 5th grade, like on our field trip to the La Brea tar pits. School bus jouncing its way across the city, purple jacarandas all in bloom. Jose sitting by himself, staring out the window, eating cheese doodles. Crunch, 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 swallow, crunch, 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 swallow. Then he finished the bag and turned and saw everyone laughing at him. That look on his face. Playa looked at me from her seat. She knew how I felt. She felt the same way. That kind of thing has to be walked out through the soles of your feet. But I didn't know that yet back then. Cornbread fail again. Too much cornmeal, not enough flour, not enough butter, too much baking powder. Shit, I don't know. I'm not the one who had the recipe in his head. I wrap it up in wax paper and walk to Dollar Only next day by way of First, so I can give it to Superman. Today, Superman's sitting against the brick wall of the alley between City of Angels Guitar and Payday Loans. You hungry, Superman? He nods, bows his head, and I set it into his outstretched palms. Carry on, my wayward son, I say, and don't let the bastards get you down. And I keep moving. Thanks.
Wow, thank you, Allison. I want to ask anyone and everyone to send forth any questions or comments through the chat function in Zoom, or if you're on video, you can try and wave me down, or also there's a little reaction button at the bottom where I think you can raise your hand. So I welcome everyone's thoughts and questions. Allison, I'm going to dive right in, if you don't mind. I loved that book, and I was really struck by, I think I was under the impression that each passage was 100 words. Do I have that wrong? Okay.
No, you have it right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
turned me on to this book, and I've read some of your other things, but yeah. And I was so struck by how elegant every passage is, elegant and visceral, and I wrote another word, and vivid. And for me, who tends to overwrite, like this was like a workshop in just this vivid, elegant writing that just, I'm sorry, I'm blathering. I want to know more about your process and how difficult that was and how you came by that idea or thought.
It was probably a process of reduction. I never know what my books are about when I begin to write them. And so I usually just have a feeling like when I'm a quilter. And so when I'm picking out colors for a quilt, I have a sense of the color scheme. So with a novel, it's kind of the same way. Like I have a feeling of what I want it to be like. And I love poems more than anything. And I wanted to write a novel that felt like a poem. And that meant, of course, that it needed to be very spare, because I don't like long poems. I like short poems. And the novel would need to be put almost through a filter so that there was nothing extraneous. And so my idea for the novel, such as it is a teenager whose friend is in trouble. So that's about as extensive as my plot summaries get. And I was in a dollar store at the time I was thinking about this great idea, a teenager whose friend is in trouble. And I also love books that have unusual structures and have some kind of visual component to them. There's a book I love, it's a memoir by Eileen Beckerman called Love, Loss, and What I Wore. Tiny, tiny little book. And on the left-hand side of each page, she drew a picture of herself for each year of her life and what she was wearing at the time, and then a tiny little memoir on the right-hand side. So I love that book so much. And so I thought, I had what I thought was just a brilliant idea. I'm in a dollar store. My teenager whose friend is in trouble can work in a dollar store. And then I pulled out my cell phone and I just went around taking photos of dollar store items. And that would be my left-hand side. And then I'd write something that came from that. And I got home and spent the rest of the day carefully arranging a Word document into landscape format and carefully placing each of the dollar store images on it. But the problem was I'm a terrible photographer and the images, they were just hideous things and there was nothing inspiring about it. So I abandoned ship, but I kept that landscape format because it's very freeing to me to have only a small space to work in. And then I thought, well, this kid works at a dollar store. There's 100 pennies in a dollar. Just make it 100 really short chapters. And I loved that. I loved working tiny like that in miniature. And about halfway through, I thought, you could just push this all the way, make each of these tiny chapters exactly 100 words. And so that's what I did. And I did not find it hard. I found it incredibly freeing and challenging in this beautiful way. So every day I would set myself a goal of around 300 words and end up with probably 1.5, 2 chapters out of that. It was a book that in retrospect, or even at the time, it just seemed to just come out of me, and I loved writing it. And I live in California part-time. My partner lives there. And so I wrote it in one winter when the jacarandas were in bloom, and we were spending some time in LA. So I walked the route that Will walks every day. I walked and walked and walked LA and took photos of the places he would go to. And so it was a really joyful writing experience, despite the fact that there's really hard stuff in the book. His dad has died of suicide, and his dear friend Playa is raped at the party where she asked him if he remembered his dad's cornbread after he leaves the party. So there's a lot that's happening in the book, but the way that Will works it out is he becomes a source of kindness for everyone that he encounters. And that is how he props himself up and props Playa up and everybody else he meets. So despite his deep knowledge of Major Tom and his social awkwardness, everything he does in life is to make Major Tom just feel included and feel seen and like he's one of the cool kids, you know. So that's Will's great gift.
Yeah, and such maturity for a young man, you know. I love you talking about love, loss, and what I wore, because I love that too. I also loved Marion Winnick's Baltimore Book of the Dead, and Sherman Alexie's book about his mother, where he combines poetry and fragments of memoir. And reading this last summer, when I was working on my memoir, was so exciting to see the form played with. So it was really inspiring. And I loved watching you when you just said a few sentences ago that it just came to you and you loved doing it. That is really fun to see in a writer. So Allison, I have a
Never
question.
happens. It's so damn rare.
Question for you from Cynthia Wold. Allison, how did you come to the personality of Will? Is he modeled on someone you know?
Oh gosh, I just love this boy so much. I spent last spring adapting the book into a screenplay, and I got to know so much more about him and everyone else in the book as I did that. He just came to me, I think, in the way that all characters come to me. It's as if they're already alive in this parallel world that is invisible, but we're right next to it. And I've always loved teenagers. I have huge respect and admiration for their searchingness, their passion, their insecurity. I just want to hold them all in my arms. I loved it when my kids were teenagers and, you know, we could sit around the kitchen and I could feed them and talk with them and their friends. And so I have a great, deep love for teenage. They're almost magical. And for this book, as with all my books, because I know so little about them, a teenager whose friend is in trouble, well, you know, what's that going to do for me? Not much. I usually make a list of random objects, and the random objects all have to go in the book before the book is done. So that gets me started. So some of the things on that random list were a cast iron skillet, a Bowie t-shirt, a miniature orange backpack. And so those things were on my list. And so coincidentally, I was perfecting my cornbread recipe at the time I wrote the book. And so I was constantly making cornbread in my cast iron skillet. And lo and behold, Will just started making cornbread. Shocker. So it's in the act of a character doing something tangible and physical with an object that their personality comes into being for me. It's always been that way. One of my friends uses one of those character development worksheets, like what religion is your character, and you know, how do they treat a server in a restaurant? And that kind of thing mystifies me. I wouldn't know how to do it. So, but if I put a cast iron pan in somebody's hand, then I can just follow what they do, just watch what they do and get to know them that way. So that's how my boy Will came into being.
That's really interesting. I'm really curious about the random objects. And side note, the New York Times brown butter cornbread, skillet cornbread, mwah, cannot recommend it enough. If I can make it, anyone can. Allison, you said something really interesting about when I read a few of my mother's book reviews. You said that some of them you really loved, and I think that's what's really, I'm discovering that it's prompting people to have those those comparisons. And the other thing I ran into, first of all, my question is, I'm curious if you can remember which ones they were.
James Lee Burke.
Which one?
I went through a real James Lee Burke phase long ago, and it was something blues, I think, he's a Southern mystery writer, and he's just a beautiful writer, just beautiful prose, which is what I always respond to. So she said she made it halfway through and then had to give up, waste of time. And I was like, no.
Excuse me. No, but she is all over the map with some of these things.
Yeah.
I'm really curious, like if I mapped it in a timeline, if there was other stuff going on in her life, that maybe shaded her view. But one of the things I'm running into that I find kind of awkward and hilarious is that there are book reviews of some of my friends' books that the people that she wasn't really fond of,
And how kind of her to keep those cards tucked away in that box and never say a word.
Right. And so as I was working on it, I was wondering, instinctually, I know she would have been behind me 1,000,000% in doing this, because she really did come around to me not having a 9-to-5 job, that this is what I did. And but I do think about her. I don't think it was necessarily private, but it was for her own record keeping.
Yeah.
So it's been an interesting piece with that, and some of my friends having to see the little reviews she wrote, because for my mom, it was a zero-sum game. Like if she knew I was friends with somebody, she had to make sure that they didn't outshine her baby girl, I think.
Oh, that's so sweet. Oh, that's so sweet.
Allison, I have another question for you if you have a minute.
Yeah.
Allison, did you include your signature thick white enamel cup in the book?
Who asked that question?
You're a Flaherty guy.
Oh, of course she did. You know how most of us tend to fall into grooves that we repeat over and over, at least I do. And, I sometimes feel that I just write the same book over and over and over with different characters and in different places and different times. But I grew up in far upstate New York, like so rural. I just came back from visiting my parents, and honest to God, I don't know how they heat their house with a fireplace and a wood stove. They're 85 years old. And I noticed that the wood on the porch is getting low. So there I am, back to childhood, just hauling wood from the barn to the porch and stacking it. And anyways, I spent a lot of time in diners, and I still do. And you know how diners always have those thick white china mugs? So I finally noticed around book 4, there was always a diner, there was always somebody in there drinking from thick white china mugs, and I made a flat rule: you are no longer allowed for the rest of your life to use the phrase thick white china mug. And you can also never put another school bus in a book, because the school bus was the crucible of horror for my life. Totally broke that one. There's school buses everywhere. But Tara, to answer your question, no, I haven't used a thick white china mug in a long time. Thank you very much. I do have some discipline.
Any other questions or comments from anyone? Let me check our chat and our little screens. Allison, again, I think it's so interesting that you say you feel like you write the same book over and over again, which as a reader, I just am amazed by that, because that I feel the exact opposite from your work. I mean, that is so enriching to me and encouraging as a writer when you do feel like you're in the same groove. I can see some of the beats I hit over and over again. And maybe it's just a function of, I don't know, being a writer and channeling and reworking your experience.
We're drawn to the things that bedevil us, and the things that we love, and the things that we alone are curious about. And so I don't see I think it's natural, that you're going to follow those threads in many different ways.
Exactly.
In my book, something really hard and unexpected has always happened in the past. And we open the book with a person trying to come to terms with it. Mary Jo, is your book going to be published next year? Is that right?
Next spring, yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited. I get to be with your mom again. What is your mom's name?
Dorothy Pehl. Yeah.
Dorothy
Thank
Pehl.
you, Allison. Yeah. It took me 4 years to write it because a lot of life happened during it, and it just felt like such a slog at times. And
It's so hard. It's just so freaking hard.
right?
Yeah. I just want to have written like Dorothy Parker. I just want it done for the day. Let me back in my house, please.
Right. Right. So I appreciate your good words. Thanks. If there are no more questions or comments, let me do a little check here. Allison, it's just been a delight. I'm so thrilled you joined us, and I loved our conversation. So thanks.
I loved it too. Thanks, Mary Jo, and thanks everybody for showing up after 2 years of Zoom in the middle of the holiday season. You are heroes.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and stay tuned for next year. I think hopefully, I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself, but I think once we open up our new space for the North Suburban Center for the Arts, which we could sure use any dollars you have to spare for our capital campaign, if I could just wedge that in there. We hope to start these in-person readings with a whole different take on different things, and I'm really excited. And I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Bye, Allison.
Bye, Mary Jo.